Welcome back, and now for the news in detail. In Iraq, at least 40 people died and over 300 wounded as police fired tear gas to disperse the protesters in Baghdad. This brings the death toll to 197 since the anti-government protests that began earlier this month. Details in this report. The demonstrations are the second phase of a week-long movement in early October, demanding an end to corruption and unemployment. Activists are urging more and more Iraqis to return to the streets.
We came today to put an end to such a humiliation. Enough. We want to live with the rest of the world. Saddam oppressed us for 35 years. We got to 16 years with these rulers. It means we have been suffering oppression for 51 years. We want a solution. We want to live. We want to live.
The United Nations has urged security forces to show restraint.
A UN human rights report released by UNAMI this week set out credible reports of violations of the right to life, including deliberate killings of unarmed protesters and the excessive use of force by units deployed to manage the demonstrations. The report also highlights concerns regarding the widespread use of repressive measures to limit publicly available information on the demonstrations.
In a bid to quell protests, Prime Minister Adil Abdul Mahdi says a ministerial reshuffle would take place next week, but he rejected the calls for government's resignation. Pakistan's President Arif Alvi has briefed Iranian President Hassan Rouhani about human rights violations in occupied Kashmir. Meeting Rouhani on the sidelines of the 18th Non-Aligned Movement Summit in Baku, Alvi hailed Iran's support for the oppressed Kashmiris. He said Pakistan and Iran need to enhance their economic relations. In a meeting with Afghan President Ashraf Ghani, Alvi said Pakistan will continue its efforts in reconstruction of Afghanistan. President Arif Alvi said Pakistan wants dignified repatriation of over 4 million Afghan refugees living in Pakistan. Pakistan, China and Russia have called for the resumption of Afghan peace talks between the US and the Taliban. The representatives met US Special Envoy for Afghanistan Zalmay Khalilzad in Moscow. In a joint statement, they urged the warring sides to reduce violence to create a conducive environment for talks. The participants said they expect all the sides to maintain a ceasefire during intra-Afghan talks. They called on the Afghan government and the Taliban to release prisoners at the beginning of the negotiations. They also said Afghan soil should not be used to threaten the security of any other country. Earlier, President Donald Trump had called off the negotiations over the killing of a US soldier in Afghanistan. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg has said the organization is fully committed to peace in Afghanistan. Speaking to reporters in Brussels, he said NATO will continue to support the Afghan security forces with training and funding. He said funding Afghan forces will aid the fight against international terrorism and create the conditions for peace. Stoltenberg said the Taliban need to demonstrate a real willingness to make real compromises to establish peace. He praised Afghan forces for their help in election security, saying the next step is to allow the election results to be counted. The people of Indian-occupied Kashmir have strongly rejected the Indian ruling Bharatiya Janata Party in local elections. Despite being the only party contesting the polls, BJP came second in the occupied valley and Ladakh. The Hindu Nationalist Party only got 81 council seats in all 3 occupied regions, facing defeat by independent candidates. The independent candidates won 270 out of 307 seats. In 22 districts of occupied Jammu and Kashmir, BJP only won 2, while independents swept 19 seats. The occupied valley is under New Delhi's curfew and communications blackout for the last 83 days. Microblogging site Twitter has blocked almost 1 million tweets on occupied Kashmir's situation on the behest of the Indian government. Committee to Protect Journalists reports say Kashmir-focused tweets have been blocked on India's request since August 2017. The report said India has sent 53 letters to Twitter seeking complete or partial ban on 400 accounts in last 2 years. The report says 90% of the withheld accounts were from Kashmir referenced group, hosting over 920,000 tweets. The occupied valley is under New Delhi's curfew and communications blackout for the last 83 days. Another man has died in a detention camp for Indians declared foreigners by PM Modi's government in Assam. India published the National Register of Citizen list in August, making almost 2 million people stateless. 70-year-old Paludas had been in a detention camp in Lower Assam since July 2017. Officials say he was admitted to the hospital earlier this month after his health deteriorated. Das's family says he was declared a foreigner despite having all the documents. The UN has urged countries fighting the war in Syria to begin discussing an end to the 8-year-long conflict. In a statement, Secretary General Antonio Guterres has praised the recent reduction in fighting in northeastern Syria. The UN chief said it is time for Syria to map a political way out of the war. Guterres said he is not aware of any conflict currently going on in northeastern Syria. He said the UN's total commitment is to ensure the Syrian Constitutional Committee will begin its work in Geneva. Guterres said the world community should hold accountable people who have committed crimes in the recent past. Turkey announced a ceasefire after its deal with Russia on Operation Peace Spring. In Ethiopia, police say 62 people and 5 policemen have been killed in 2 days of protests against Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed. The PM recently won the Nobel Peace Prize for his achievements in regional peacemaking. The demonstrations kicked off when prominent activist Jawar Mohammed accused the government of trying to assassinate him. The Defense Ministry says the army has been deployed to 7 cities to calm the situation. The protest came a day after Abiy warned in Parliament that unidentified media owners were creating ethnic unrest. Supporters of Jawar, himself a media owner, accuse Abiy of centralizing power, silencing dissent and jailing political prisoners. Amnesty International says several anti-government figures have been arrested since Abiy took office. In Palestine, 77 Palestinians have been wounded by Israeli forces during weekly protests at the Gaza border. Gaza's health ministry says 31 demonstrators were shot with live rounds. The Israelis have killed 312 Palestinians since the outbreak of the weekly protests in March 2018. 19,000 others have been injured. The Great March of Return protests have called for the end of Israel's blockade of the Gaza Strip. The European Union has agreed to grant the United Kingdom another extension on its Brexit deadline. However, the bloc is delaying its decision on the length of the extension until next week. The UK is due to leave the EU on October the 31st. The country has asked the EU for a 3-month extension as Prime Minister Boris Johnson struggles to get MPs to pass his deal. On Monday, MPs are expected to consider the PM's call for an early general election. Johnson says he wants the election on December 12th if the EU offers a Brexit delay until January the 31st. In the UK, police have arrested a 4th suspect in connection with a probe into the deaths of 39 people found in a lorry container in Essex. The suspect is a 48-year-old man from Northern Ireland. 3 people, including the lorry driver, are already in custody on suspicion of manslaughter and conspiracy to traffic people. Earlier, police said the dead were all believed to be the Chinese nationals. Now, Deputy Chief Constable Pippa Mills says the force won't comment on speculation about the nationalities of the dead. The European Parliament has rejected a plan to set up research and rescue operations for refugees and migrants in the Mediterranean. The motion was defeated by 299 votes to 288 in favor. The Parliament voted against the resolution, urging the member states to improve efforts to rescue people from the drowning in the sea. The majority of the votes against the motion came from the Parliament's largest centre-right group. Earlier, the UN said 18,000 migrants have died in the Mediterranean since 2014. In the United States, a court has ordered the Justice Department to hand over an unredacted copy of Robert Mueller's Russia investigation to the House committee. The ruling has underlined the legality of the Democratic-led impeachment inquiry against President Trump. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi welcomed the order, calling it a blow to President Trump's attempt to put himself above the law. The ruling will allow House investigators to portions of the report involving Donald Trump Jr.'s meeting with the Russians. The judge has given the Justice Department until next week to provide the blacked-out material from the report. The Justice Department argued the redacted information cannot be disclosed as it contains highly confidential material. The judge strongly disagreed and subpoenaed the redacted portions of the Mueller's report. The U.S. has released alleged Russian spy Maria Butina from a Florida prison after she served most of her 18-month sentence. Butina, who was convicted of conspiring to influence U.S. conservative activists, has been deported to Russia. Butina's attorney, Robert Driscoll, said she was released from the prison for her good behavior. Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has welcomed Butina's release. The Russian pleaded guilty in December last year to one count of conspiring to act as a foreign agent. In Chile, almost 1 million anti-government protesters have converged in Santiago in the country's largest ever protest march. Following a week of deadly protests, demonstrators are demanding economic reform and President Sebastián Piñera's resignation. Details in this report.
Waving national flags, banging pots and bearing placards, protesters streamed to the streets in Santiago, urging political and social change. Many sang popular resistance songs from the 1970s, the era of Augusto Pinochet dictatorship. Protests that began last week over a rise in public transport fares has boiled into riots, killing 19 people and injuring hundreds. Authorities have deployed 20,000 soldiers using tear gas and water cannons to disperse the demonstrators.
I think the first thing the president has to do is to get the military off the street and change the cabinet, and that there are conscious people making statements to the country that are consistent with what people want.
Though serious incidents have decreased in recent days, the protests show no sign of ending.
The unity never before the Chilean people had protested in years of democracy in this way. You see that there are people from all kinds, elders, children, youth, workers and students, all united in the same cause.
In a tweet, the Chilean president Sebastián Piñera says he has listened to the people's message, saying, "We have all changed."
Welcome back. Bolivia says it is open for a review of the presidential election results by the Organization of American States and the European Union. Bolivia's electoral tribunal head, Maria Eugenia, has invited outside bodies to audit the electoral process after violent clashes erupted over the vote. The OAS has called Bolivia's election tribunal to hold the second round runoff vote between Morales and his top challenger, Carlos Mesa. The recommendation has been supported by the EU, Argentina, Brazil, Colombia and the US. The Electoral Tribunal declared President Evo Morales' victory in the first round of the elections held last Sunday. Opposition has protested the election results, claiming they were fraudulent. Thousands of people blocked streets and lit fires in cities across Bolivia, calling for their vote to be respected. A Hong Kong court has banned people from disclosing the personal details of police officers and their families. The ruling has been made to prevent protesters hitting police personnel. Police say many of its officers have had personal details leaked online, which has sparked harassment of family members. Hong Kong's court was approached asking for an injunction preventing people from publishing personal information. The court has granted an injunction for 14 days. In months of protests, demonstrators have attacked police with petrol bombs, rocks and lasers shown into their eyes. Police have responded with tear gas, water cannon and rubber bullets. World governments have pledged $9.8 billion in fresh financing for the Green Climate Fund to fight global warming. The fund was set up to help developing nations shift to a carbon-free economy. The fund's executive director, Yannick Guillain-Maric, says the U.S. did not contribute. Guillain-Maric said a number of donor countries have doubled their pledges to make up for the lost U.S. funds.
27 countries have announced a contribution. 75% of these 27 pledges are an increase, and nearly half, 13 out of the 27, are actually a doubling of the contribution.
In Japan, 10 people have died in flooding and mudslides caused by torrential rains. Hundreds of residents are stranded at evacuation centers because rail and bus services have been suspended in northeastern parts of the country. Authorities say Chiba Prefecture has recorded the equivalent of months' rain in just 12 hours. They warned of more landslides and flooding despite the storm moving away from Japan. Prime Minister Shinzo Abe has called for an all-out rescue effort, relief work and damage assessment. The region is facing its third heavy rainstorm in 6 weeks, just 2 weeks after the powerful typhoon Hagibis killed 88 people. In the U.S., wildfires raging in California have forced over 50,000 people to leave their homes. Officials say a number of buildings in the city of Santa Clarita have been destroyed. Heavy winds and warm weather fed the blaze overnight as it destroyed parts of the city. The local weather department says another burst of high winds is expected over the weekend. A volcano on the French Indian Ocean island of Reunion has erupted for the 5th time this year. It spewed lava for the 2nd time this month. Details in this report.
The Le Patron de la Fournaise is said to be one of the most active volcanoes in the world. The volcano on Reunion Island in the Indian Ocean began throwing up lava on Friday and continued into the weekend. It produced a spectacular light show for those who ventured out.
So we're in the enclosure by the lava road. We are 10 meters from the flow of lava. You can feel the heat. We are getting tanned by the heat.
Many describe the experience as amazing and something they would remember for life.
It's a bit scary, like the apocalypse. It is magnificent. It's great.
In the last 6 years, the volcano has erupted 15 times, attracting thousands of spectators on each blowout.
Russian artists in Rostov are celebrating the local breed of horses by painting the animal onto stable walls. The paintings of the Don horses are part of a campaign to raise awareness of the breed's endangered status. More in this report.
Driven by the lifelong love for horses, enthusiasts in Rostov Oblast captured beautiful kinetic moments of horses on walls. Nadezhda Skripkina and her husband have been breeding Russian Donchaks since 2016. The breed is well known for endurance and versatility. The stable is currently home to only 15 of them. Skripkina says there are only dozens of Donchaks left, which puts the breed on the verge of extinction.
We decided that our goal would be to introduce residents of Rostov-on-Don to this breed and tell them about and show them how beautiful and versatile they are.
Last month, the couple invited the artists to spend several days living next to the horses while painting them. Among several artists who answered the call was Olga Schiff.
Back then, a horse was everything to a person. Then the industrial age began and horses were no longer needed. They gradually died out. These horses are not machines that can be made in a factory.
According to a study, there were only 180 Donchak horses left in 2016. Skripkina plans to expand and improve her private facility, making it a tourist attraction.
American businessman Bill Gates has become the richest billionaire with a net worth of $105.7 billion. The Bloomberg Billionaire Index says Gates passed Amazon chief Jeff Bezos to make the top spot. The Microsoft founder jumped the table as Bezos' net worth was cut by nearly $7 billion. Amazon stock fell more than 8% after the e-commerce giant reported its first quarterly drop in profit since 2017. Bezos' net worth sank to $103.9 billion. In the meantime, Microsoft won a $10 billion 10-year contract with the Defense Department to build the military's war cloud. Amazon had long been seen as a front-runner for the Joint Enterprise Defense Infrastructure Cloud contract. Lows and the highs of the business world now. The General Motors workers have ended a 40-day-long strike after approval of a new contract. The United Auto Workers Union strike cost General Motors around $2 billion. The strike was the longest in car industry since 1970. It began in September with the end of the union's contract with the car maker. The company has agreed to a 3% wage increase, maintaining health benefits and removing a cap on profit sharing with employees. The new agreement also includes a signing bonus and creates... Now, the weather situation from around the globe. That's all for now. For the latest updates, you may follow us on social media at indus.news.